Hello everyone. Today in the final presentation of the semester, we Group 7 would like to present about the translation testing. We would like to divide into three main parts. The first part is the theory, which will be delivered by me. The second part, the game, will be presented by Ha, and the last part, the case study, will be in charge by Home. Now, shall we start? Moving on to the first part. After this, we would hope that you can answer 5 most fundamental questions about translation testing, which is when to test a translation, why testing a translation, who tests a translation, how to test a translation, and how to make use of the translation testing result. The first question, when to test a translation? It is suggested that the translation testing should be done as early as possible, right at the completion of the first section, episode, or chapter. In this way, it would provide valuable feedback to the translator to help point out his weaknesses so that he can improve on the later part and not making the same mistake again. The second reason is that if it is left until there is a huge volume of work, the translation testing may not be done carefully, which leads to some mistake being left behind. In addition to checking single part one by one, it will also need a final revision to have an overview of the whole project. Next up, why do we need to test the translation? A translation testing is needed to ensure 3 criteria for the translation, which is accuracy, clarity, and naturalness. In some cases, the translator, while trying to getting across the meaning, he accidentally adds more information or misses some, and sometimes the information is even changed and leading to the different meaning results. So it's necessary to check for the accuracy of the translation. The second reason for testing a translation work is to avoid ambiguity, which is to ensure clarity. Sometimes the information in the translation work might be accurate, but still cannot communicate to the people who is used to it. So it is need to check for clarity to make sure that the translation work easy to understand as the source text itself. The third reason is to ensure naturalness. Sometimes, even when the translation work are accurate and easy to understand, it still makes the reader have the feeling like this one is a translation work. It doesn't sound natural. It lacks the use of idiomatic forms, and it sounds like it is translated by a robot. So to avoid this mistake, the translator needs to check for the naturalness of the translation. The third question is, who's to test the translation? There are several persons can test the translation, which is the translator, the consultant, the tester, and the reviewer. Each one of them is in charge of different types of testing. While the translator himself can do some style check, or the comprehension check, or the naturalness check, he can also ask various people to help him, like the consultant. This person is specialized in giving advice to the translator to help him answer some hard questions and also check for possible inaccuracies and for the correct use of translation principle. Next is the tester. Sometimes the tester can also be the translator. Their job is to test the respondent to get feedback to improve the translation work. Finally is the reviewer. They are the ones who are willing to read through the translation and make comments about the clarity and naturalness. Sometimes they can also help accuracy. So now we have answered 3 questions: when, why, and who. Now it's time for the most important one. So how do we test a translation? There are several ways of testing a translation, which is comparison with the source language, by translation, comprehension test, naturalness test, readability test, and consistency check. Each one of them have their merits and disadvantages. It is advised that the translator would make you observe different methods to get the best result. The very first method of testing is comparison with the source language. It can be done by the translator himself or by someone else who knows both languages well and knows translation principle. The main purposes of the comparisons is to check for equivalent of information content. It is to make sure that all the information is included, nothing's omitted, nothing added, and nothing different. Now, please take a look into the slide. Here I have a translation work of a very familiar story, Tấm Khám. For a better comparison check, it is recommended that the translation is typed with double spacing and wide margins so that ideas can be written in the margin and so that alternatives can be written above the line for later evaluation. The next type is batch translation. As its name suggested, it is done by someone else who is bilingual in the source and the receptor languages so that they can make a batch translation of the translated text into the source language. They must not read the source text beforehand, and its main purpose is for the translator or the consultant to make a careful comparison with the source text, looking for differences in meaning and for inadequate application of translation principles. This type of method requires the batch translator to be truly bilingual, and the batch translation should have each lexical item rendered literally. It doesn't need to be as idiomatic as the translation. It focuses on meaning equivalent rather than naturalness. As you can see on the next slide, this is an example of a batch translation from English to African, back to English. The batch translated text is different from the source text, but it helps the consultant to understand what is written in the translated text. The third method of testing is comprehension test. It is carried out by the translator himself or by another tester who is trained in translation principles and understands the goals of an idiomatic translation. He then, together with his notes and a cassette recorder, will test some respondent to answer some questions relating to the translation work. The main goal of this type method is to figure out if it is understood correctly by the native speaker. Because of its nature, the respondent should be a variety of people coming from different groups of society. It can be young people, middle-aged, and old people, or with highly educated and with newly literate people also. Now, let's take a closer look into one specific case of a tester testing the respondent. Usually, when a tester carries out this type of test, he would make three types of questions: the style question, the themes question, and details question. The style questions is to show whether or not the translation is at a level of complexity appropriate to the audience for whom it is intended, while the theme question focuses on the high points of the story or argument. The purpose of these theme questions is to determine if the main points of meaning are clear in the translation. On the other hand, the detailed questions ask about words, phrases, and other matters such as the meaning of the keywords, the implications of symbolic actions, and the interpretation of a figure of speech which have been used in the translation. It may also include questions about facts such as who did what, when, where, and why. Typically, when asking about style, these questions should be included. What type of talk is this? Story, instruction, scolding, or advices? Or do you think he was talking to children or adults, men or women? For theme and detail question, please check out this example. Here on the screen is a Japanese folktale story named The Tanuki and the Priest. It is translated from Japanese to English. When asked about the theme, respondents should expect this type of question. Why did the priest ask for the coins and then say he didn't really want them? Or how does the tanuki go out of his way to respect the priest's values? For the detailed question regarding the story of the tanuki and the priest, these might be some suggested questions. How did the priest spend his time? How did his neighbors show their respect for him? And why did the tanuki come to the priest's home? While the respondents are answering these questions, it's very important that the tester not interrupt the respondent. Instead, he should just note down or record it on a cassette to refer back to it later. The respondents must know that it is the translation that is being tested, not themselves. It is simply a way of finding out if the translation needs improving in some way. The fourth method of checking is the naturalness test. It is carried out by the reviewers who know enough about the translation principle and are given beforehand a defective text and one which communicates naturally so that they can clearly understand the difference between two of them, to check if the form of the translation is natural and the style is appropriate. So how is it normally done? First of all, the reviewer would read through the whole section of the translation at one time to check the flow of the translation and the overall meaning of the text. While reading, they would mark any place where it was hard to read or where it seemed unnatural or unclear. After reading all the way through, he should go back and study carefully the place where he marked the copy. Then he should write notes either in the margin or on a separate paper to give to the translator. Finally, he will go through it again, looking for any additional suggestion. It would be helpful if the reviewer tells why he had a problem or why he thinks something needs to be changed. Next, we have readability test. Similar to the comprehension test, it is carried out by either the translator or a tester. They would then ask someone to read a part of the translation aloud. It is best recommended that these people are the one who will be the user of the translation. After having someone read aloud the translation, the tester would note down on his own copies of the problems which occurred, including writing in the wording that was substituted. If possible, he should know the reason for the difficulty. The checking readability is especially concerned about the problems of the information load, which means to avoid of too much information coming too fast or too little information coming too slow and boring. It should be noted that readability may also be affected by formatting methods, the size of type, punctuation, spelling, size of margins, and space between lines. Here on the slide are two different versions of the story of Tâm and Cám, translated from Vietnamese to English. The translation on the left side uses simple language which would be suitable for the uninformed target audience, while the translation on the right hand uses more complex words so that it would be suitable for the educated layman. The final method is the consistency check. It is done by the translator himself together with a group of readers to improve the consistency of the text, to check for formatting and content issues. For this type of check, group readers would normally look for consistency mistakes in spelling of the names of people and places, foreign words, capitals, punctuation, quotations, use of question marks, comma, brackets, technical term, and the formatting style. One way to carry out the test is to use some application like the Shadow multi-term, which would notify you anytime you find a terminology that you have already found before. So now we know how to test the translation work. So what would we do with the test result? Theoretically, you would apply these 6 methods onto different drafts. After the initial draft is completed, it will be very helpful to the translator if he does some readability checks and comprehension checks together with a careful comparison with the source text for accuracy. After correcting the initial draft, he will have a second draft. Then this draft will be tested by a careful comparison with the source text. Then a back translation, a comprehension check, natural needs checks, and readability checks are also made. Based on the check, the translator would have a revision draft. When it is completed, he needs to perform consistency checking, readability testing, and comprehension testing. After the final change has been done, he would have a final draft. At this step, the translator needs to check carefully for consistency in technical matter and proofread a number of times. And if a number of people can read through it completely, this will give the best check for the final draft. And the final product is a completed version of the translation work.